What's going on, everybody? You found Bottom Tier Collector. As always, I'm your host, The Bearded One, and I thank you for your support. So, about a couple months ago, maybe just a couple weeks ago, Super Russ 9000 issued a challenge to the community to divulge their origin story, and I very excitedly accepted that challenge and divulged my origin story. And it occurred to me after I uploaded the video that I forgot a key era in my history, my development as a comic book reader, comic book collector. And this era really defined me. I think it really came to fruition by the time I started purchasing comic books. And that's comic strips. Comic strips have had such a profound impact on my life. I was born in 1989, and so I can remember throughout my entire childhood, before really the internet replaced the newspaper and really made the newspaper obsolete. And, it was just part of the routine where you'd get the Sunday paper or the Saturday paper or you'd come home from school and you'd see the newspaper in the driveway, and I would flip right to the comic strips and I would devour them when I was a kid. That's all I wanted the newspapers for, were the comic strips. There was Chatty Cathy, and I think that's her name, Chatty Cathy. And there was Gru, and then there was I forget what it's called, but it was this married couple, a husband and a wife, and it was very dry humor. And then there was also Dilbert sometimes in the newspaper. Of course, there was Snoopy. Back then when I was a kid, I called it Snoopy. It wasn't Charlie Brown, it wasn't Peanuts, it was Snoopy, because I wanted to read about Snoopy. Sometimes you'd get Calvin and Hobbes, and then you'd get Garfield the cat, which is what I lived for. Garfield was what I wanted to read most of the time. And that carried over into Garfield and Friends, the cartoon, the animated show. And I have such fond memories of that big fat orange cat terrorizing John, and playing pranks on Odie and being kind of mean to Normal. I love those comic strips. And then that progressed into, around 4th, 5th, 6th grade, Garfield was placed into these children's books. And I don't mean children as in made for children, like 5-year-olds. They were made for big kids, meant for like 5th and 6th graders, where Garfield and Odie and Normal and maybe another character or two that I don't remember, they were all like buffed up superheroes, and I'd love to track down these books and pass them down to my son. I don't own them anymore, but I'd love to purchase a couple and give them to my son. And I think, when I'm really thinking about that played such a key impact on me and my eventual journey into collecting comic books. Because now my life is going full circle, and I find myself wanting to get back into comic strips. I find myself hunting down like collections of Garfield strips, in collected books. And I don't know where I'd be with the superhero genre, and where I'd be. There's a certain, I can't explain it. There's a certain aesthetic I look for. There's a certain vibe I'm looking for. Like, I really like Mr. Miracle's series, Volume 2, where he's domesticated and he's at home, and it's kind of like a sitcom that J.M. DeMatteis run. And it shows him and Big Barda at home trying to be husband and wife, and it's supposed to be really comical and funny. And I think a lot of, and then there's also Hitman. There's just a certain I just cannot describe it. There's a certain aesthetic. There's a certain I don't even know how to describe this, but I think what I look for in that Mr. Miracle run and Hitman and Transmetropolitan, it's this secret ingredient that I know what it is in my brain, and it makes sense to me in my brain. I just can't express it because it's not something that there's a term for. Um, it's just a certain feeling I get when I look at something, and it reminds me back to those Garfield days, I believe. And so I don't know if I wouldn't be a comic book collector without Garfield, but I think a lot of my taste in comic books come from Garfield, and not necessarily a feeling of nostalgia, but that same feeling of, this feels good to me. This feels right. This feels like what I'm into, kind of thing. And now, talking about my life going full circle, I'm also passing down Garfield and Friends to my son, and he enjoys Garfield and Friends, the cartoon. And I've tried to get him into comic book strips. I passed down my Calvin and Hobbes big comic strip, and I think it's over his head. I don't think he's quite there yet to understand the humor in it. So I've kind of backed off, trying to pass the strips down to my son. Maybe I could go a little more lighthearted with something like a Garfield or something. But then fast forward to Bloom County Comics. Somewhere in middle school, maybe even high school, but I think it was middle school, maybe more like 8th grade, my mother passed down her Bloom County comic book collection to me, and I've taken care of it. Any major damage to these books was done by my mother, or done, while she was storing these books. And I've grown to love these characters, Opus the Penguin, and, there's Opus right there. And here's Bill the Cat. I love Bill the Cat. I think Bill the Cat's my favorite character. And then there's also, I think this character is Milo. So, yeah. So the little kid here is Milo, and I forget the gopher's name. I can't remember them all. But yeah, they're just filled with these strips, and there's a lot of '80s jokes here, a lot of '80s references, because this was made in the '80s. See if I can get a copyright here. 1987, right here. And you got George Sr. right there. Timeless stories. Sometimes I don't get the 80s references. There's a lot of political themes in here, I've noticed, and and sometimes it gets a little adult, but I wouldn't say risque or something, something somebody's conscious of what they're reading would stay away from. And then there's also colored pages as well. He kind of inserts some colored pages in there. And it's just beautiful, cute stories. So, okay, Milo Bloom is the blonde-headed kid. Let me get up close. Milo Bloom is the blonde-headed kid. So the red-headed kid is a different character, and then there's also a rabbit. Let's see here. This is, they got Sean Penn right here. Just really cool stuff. I just absolutely love Bloom County comic books. I would encourage you to give them a try. if you can get your hands on Bloom County comic books. I'm not sure who this is, but you know, another reference, 80s reference right here. I even had a fan page at one point, a Tumblr fan page, where Berkeley briefly revived Bloom County Comics, and I found a free app where the new updated strips were being uploaded to. And so I would just screenshot those and upload them to my Tumblr account. And it was fun for a while. I'd like to get back into it. As it's not like I was posting original content. I was just using Tumblr as a place to upload these strips. You know, and there's themes of manic depression, and there's themes of, you know, Bill the Cat's this crazy cat that you can't ever hear him, you can't ever understand him. He always just says "ack" all the time. That's hilarious, you know. And Opus is kind of like a Charlie Brown character, where he's an overly complicated kid character with these adult problems. And it's pretty funny. And then this is the last thing I was going to show before I get off here. But there's a little streak here where there's some minor continuity in these books if you read the trade paperbacks. But in 6th grade, and I remember it was in 6th grade, I drew. This is the closest thing you'll get to a splash page in comic strips. I drew this. I drew every character in this little splash page. And it was pretty good. I wish I was looking for my portfolio before I turned on the camera. I used to draw, something I plan to get back into in the future. But yeah, I used to draw Opus, and I drew Billy and the Boingers, or Death Tongue. And it was pretty good. I was very impressed with my drawings. And I don't know, I just have very fond memories of these Bloom County comic books that I wish I could go more into detail about Bloom County, but it's been so long since I've read these. I need to go back and read these again. I've read them all, and I need to wear them out again. IDW has a collection, so if you already know about Bloom County comic strips, IDW, I guess, obtained the rights from Berkeley Breathe to print collected books, and they have they printed off the complete library, so you could have every story in the IDW collection. And I think they're precious. I would recommend these Bloom County comic strips to anybody who enjoys comic strips, or is from the 80s, or you're older and can enjoy that kind of thing. And I'm just kind of rambling here, but I figured this would be, you know, kind of the lost years, the lost tapes of my origin story. I think Bloom County and Garfield especially played a big impact on me getting to comic books in the future, because they would remind me of my childhood, and that's really what all us adult children do, is we're trying to relive our childhood, because no one wants to grow old. That'll do me, guys. I hope I made a coherent video. I hope this was entertaining. I'd love to dive deeper into Bloom County, and maybe that's something I can do in the future. Thank you as always for your support. I name drop Super Russ 9000. Go check out his channel. And until next time, guys.